Hi there. So we are going to get started now. I just wanted to welcome you all. I appreciate you so much for coming. And even for those of you watching the recording, I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the questions that I received in advance because I know some of you can't attend and then some of you don't necessarily want to hop on live, and that's absolutely fine. What I wanted to do was I'll start off with some of the questions that I received, so I make sure I cover everything. And for those of you who have questions live, just I'll give you an opportunity and let me answer them on the fly. I can absolutely do that. So we can just jump in uh, as you are prepared to do. So the first question that I received is, my daughter, who is 11, is having trouble sleeping. Is there anything that we can do to figure out why? Now, for this particular person, I know we don't have DNA on this particular child. So what I would suggest, and I don't think most people do at this point, hopefully someday it will get to that level where we have DNA as soon as a child is born. But for most people, what I would suggest is to start with looking at the landscape of that particular symptom. So in this case with sleep, when did sleep problems begin? Is it every night or is it some nights? Does it seem to be a falling asleep issue or staying asleep issue? And then looking at how long it's been an issue. When did it start? Is there any extenuating circumstance that seems to be contributing? So are we looking at some additional stress or a move or school change, anything that's going on that's making it more of an issue right now? And when you are able to eliminate things like that and really narrow in on what's going on, we have to be able to appreciate that even foods, certainly caffeine, any exposure to chocolate that would be a source of caffeine. If a child or even an adult doesn't process caffeine very well, your CYP gene, you want to limit the exposure to even chocolate later in the evening. So not that you can't have it at all, but you want to make sure that it's not contributing too much to the system. Then what we want to do is make sure that it's not, when we're looking at sleep, it can be overthinking and the just ruminating thoughts, and again, that can be from stress. It can be from activity level. If they're working out, maybe they have sports practice late after school and like late into the evening, that can certainly be a factor. So we want to be able to consider all of those contributors and then be able to calm the system. A big one that we kind of ignore because we're all doing it is being on the screens and having blue light that can overwhelm the circadian rhythm process of ramping up. We want to make sure that the body is able to produce melatonin efficiently and adequately. Melatonin is produced from serotonin. So we want to be able to have enough serotonin that we're processing it. We need to lower our lights and not have super bright lights going into the evening. And the best rule of thumb is as the sun goes down, that we lower and dim our lights inside as well as the sun going down outside. We want to make sure that we give ourselves adequate hydration through the day, but not too much leading up to sleep. And we want to make sure that we are documenting, because when you are making changes, it can be difficult to recognize what it is that is making the difference. Or sometimes we just don't even know. When I don't know at 11 if you are out of the loop with all of the nutrients or nutrition and items that they're eating. But if they go over to a friend's house after school, you don't necessarily know everything that they're eating and drinking. So being able to get their buy-in to that documentation, that can be a challenge, especially for teenagers. But you want to be able to explain to them the value of it. When you understand how important it is to reflect on what has been affecting the body so that you can make adjustments to improve the performance of sleep. You need to have sleep, especially 11 all the way through, to 21. And of course, we all need sleep, but we want growth, right? We want them to be able to grow. We want them to be able to develop and make sure that they can learn properly and focus in school and all of the things that we all want to be able to do. But growing is it takes up a lot of resources and a lot of energy. So we don't want to lose sight of that opportunity. Excuse me, just 1 minute. I'll be right back. Thank you. I had to let the dog out. So we want to be able to do all of those things for our children and make sure that they aren't given a false sense of, I'm a bad sleeper. It's not that, right? It doesn't have to be that way. There can be so many mitigating circumstances that are involved, and even temporarily, but we label ourselves as bad sleepers, or we may even feel like we're a nighttime people. So in the summertime, they stay up later, then they go to school, or maybe they're on break, spring break at this point, and then they stay up later, and then they go back to school and they say, well, that's because I'm a late person. And that's true. There are people there are genes that identify, like even your clock gene, which I know is ironic, but that's what it's called, is the clock gene. So many of the genes that we look at to understand our bodies can tell us more about how much sleep we need, when we benefit most from sleep, and what can interfere with sleep. So that's the value of really understanding our DNA. And when you're ready to do that, I would encourage it, because 11 is not too young. I mentioned last month, one of the questions was, how young is too young to do DNA testing? I don't really feel there is a too young age. I really feel that because DNA doesn't change, how soon do you want information on how to live the healthiest you possibly can live? And for my children, I did DNA for all my children as soon as I learned about it. And they have their DNA. We've gone through it at different points in their lives. They've asked questions about it, and we've dug in deeper because things come up and they want to know more. That's the other thing I would say, is you don't have to know or dig in deeply to everything all at once. You don't have to invest hours and hours all at once to learn your DNA. You learn what you want to learn, and you gain information as you go. And of course, I have a program that you can dive in really deeply if you're having health issues, if you are wanting to solve the challenges right away, or you want to know what you should be eating, how to handle detoxification, how to handle inflammation and oxidative stress and gut and immune health. We have that program available, but not everyone wants to have that intensive information. It's when people are really all about health and they're ready to step it up because they don't want to be on medications. They don't want to wait for something to go wrong. That can be a good step. But if you have just one symptom or something that you want to improve, it can be a little bit lighter approach where you do things gradually. Let's see if I have any questions in the chat. Okay, I don't see any right now. Okay, so the next question that I have, I've been feeling like gluten may be an issue for me, and I've been reducing my intake. What's my best next step? So again, I'm assuming there's no DNA to look at because we would know for sure. When you look at DNA, there are genetic SNPs to look at for gluten sensitivity, and then there are other SNPs to look at for celiac. So we have a good idea. And then there's also wheat allergy. But in most cases, we're dealing with either gluten sensitivity or celiac. So it's really valuable to know that and then look at how to support the body with the nutrition overall, because you're obviously taking a pretty big food group out of the system. So it can be really helpful to look at that. But when you don't know that, I would say really listen to your body and listen to, if you feel better when you don't eat gluten, you shouldn't have any, because eating a little bit of gluten it's almost like getting beaten up a little. It's not really something you want to do in even the smallest amount of degree. You want it to be a full removal. And the reason I liken it to being beaten up is because that is what it's doing to your organs. When you are eating gluten and you're not handling it well, and you are used to it, your body is still being affected, but you're just so used to those symptoms, or you're not sure what to blame it on. Then when you are starting to reduce your intake, you may find that you feel better because the burden isn't as heavy. You're not having it as frequently. But if you are exposed to it one time, it enters your digestive system, and it affects the microbiome. It affects your tight junctions of your gut lining, and it is very reactive in your intestines. So it can degrade your villi in your intestines, which ultimately flattens them. And those villi are there to pick up all of the nutrition that goes through your system. So once your nutrients are broken down into smaller molecules, those villi are picking up what your body needs to take in, all of those different nutrients. When they're tamped down, you aren't getting the nutrition that you need, no matter how well you're eating. So we don't want to do that. And certainly, I'm not diminishing the value of reducing your exposure to gluten. I think it's a good step. But if it's validating that gluten is not your friend, and you feel better when you're not eating it, then I would say go 100% gluten-free. And there are many products out there now that are decent. You can make things at home. I've been gluten-free for 17 years. And so I have a lot of recipes. If you need recipes, if you need tips, if there are things that you're not sure about, the things that stand out to me, like you always have to be careful of sauces, and especially in a restaurant, because very, very often it is thickened with flour. And definitely soy sauce. There is gluten-free soy sauce, and tamari sauce is typically gluten-free, but you don't want to just order fried rice and not say that you need gluten-free or soy sauce free. Sometimes is what you have to do because they just don't really recognize the soy sauce that's gluten-free. Some people do. Ask them if they have tamari instead of soy sauce and ask them to make your fried rice or whatever it is you're having with that. But if they're not experienced in it, they don't clean, the wok. They won't clean it thoroughly. So there's gluten exposure there. Cross contamination is a big, big thing, especially when you first go gluten free, because your body is still very sensitive to it. As you move on, like I have celiac, as you move on, I don't feel like my body is as sensitive now, but I am still super, super rigid about it because I know what it's doing to my stomach lining and to my intestines. I don't need to have any clues anymore because I don't want to risk it. So that's what I would do is my next step would be to go completely gluten free. And then I would do a DNA test because then you will know. There is another thing that you should be aware of, and I know it complicates things and makes it harder, but a lot of people who have to go gluten free have to also go dairy free for a while, at least a while, because there are similar proteins that can be misinterpreted. And like oatmeal, I would order as gluten-free oats. Like if you buy it in the store, Bob's Red Mill has gluten-free oats, and there are some other brands, of course. But for some people, the proteins are too similar. Even when it's gluten-free, it can fire up the system. So we have to listen to our own bodies and not just go from a list. Be aware of how you feel. And when you do DNA testing, you can verify if you have a dairy issue or if it just feels like you have a dairy issue because of the protein similarities. Do you have a gluten sensitivity? Do you have celiac? Or do you just have some damage to your gut lining that needs a break? And then once you've given yourself a break, you can go back to eating certain foods that have become irritating. It really is a sliding scale, but you know the facts. In terms of other testing, I mean, lab testing can be helpful, but it doesn't tell you why. You can have antigens in your blood for the for gluten, but it doesn't tell you why. Why am I reacting to it? I don't know. I mean, the doctors don't know. That's what I heard anyway. Well, you have this in your blood, so you shouldn't be eating gluten, but we don't know why. So it wasn't until I did DNA testing on my own that I realized exactly what was going on. So let's see. Questions. Feel free to put your questions into the chat if you have any. Let's see. Allergies. Okay, allergies are a big issue in my family, but antihistamines make us tired. Is there a better, more natural way? Yes, there absolutely is. Antihistamines are not the way. I'm going to tell you right now. And I know it's frustrating because that's what we're told to take. That's what not it's not out of any misgivings. It's just out of the marketing of it, right? That's what we're told is helpful. But antihistamines are blockers. They block your histamine receptors so that you don't have the outward symptoms. But guess what? The histamine is still trapped in your body. It's not being escorted out of the body. It's elevated, which is going to elevate your inflammation. And that is something that is very unhealthy And it is also very uncomfortable and unhealthy. Just super, like from a health standpoint, inflammation is a big trigger for disease. So we do not want to promote inflammation or oxidative stress. So that is probably the biggest reason I would say don't use antihistamines. The second is you have to ask why. Some people get really amped up on antihistamines, and some people are like super tired. And either way, it's not a good thing. It's just not, because it's just your body retaliating and saying, this is not helping me. This is not a good thing. So the better way, the long route is do DNA testing, learn what your body is actually reactive to. And if you can't remove it, you learn how to support the body in a very specific way. And it could be retraining the immune system. Now, there are homeopathics that are amazing. I've used them with my kids, and 2 of my 3 kids had allergies when they were young, and they really don't now, because the homeopathics really retrained their immune systems in a very specific way so that they don't overreact. It's like desensitizing, but it's not through overexposure or any kind of exposure therapy. It is through retraining the immune response. What I really like about it is they're inexpensive. They are easy to take, even for little kids, because they just put them under the tongue. And they are really just gentle on the body. It's not going to interfere. It's not going to make you sleepy. It's not going to interfere with sleep. And it's not going to cause any side effects. So there's a huge benefit there. The other thing I would say is whenever we see allergies and inflammation and skin reactions, if you see any kind of redness of the skin or bumps, that's where I look at histamine for sure. And allergies are that first indicator. And so you want to understand how the body handles histamine, how the body processes histamine. And it's really important to manage that because, again, it's just that big contributor to inflammation. Excuse me, one sec. So when we're talking about allergies, again, knowing what it is that we are affected by can be really helpful, because if we know that with spring season coming, that we are about to encounter a lot of pollen and we know we're reactive to pollen, then it gives us an opportunity to prepare the body to have the right items in hand and adjust our diet, because our diet is another source of histamine. And red sauces and certain foods that we can be more reactive to, we want to minimize. And if we are even leftovers, things that we make the day before, as the especially meat sits, it accumulates more and more histamine. So you can throw it in the freezer and that will help minimize. So you might want to portion it out one meal at a time, and so that you can pull it out of the freezer one meal at a time, and then you can reheat it, and it's fewer. It's going to be a lower histamine level for you. The preparation of having the different histamine products on hand, there are histamine products that are amazing that can actually reduce your histamine load in your body and escort it out of the body rather than the antihistamines. And it is, again, looking at your DNA, appreciating if you have an AO1C gene that is compromised, that is the one that produces DAO. And DAO is involved in breaking down histamine. If you don't have that in full capacity, that gene, then having some support is really valuable for DAO. Now, there are other histamine supports that help just to kind of get the extra histamine out of the body. And then there is another product that helps with food-based. So if you're eating something that's higher in histamine and you know you're going to eat it in advance, you can have those on hand and take them with the higher histamine meals, and it helps your body break it down. It's almost like calling in extra reinforcements when you know that you're going to need them, and having them on hand ahead of time, fantastic, because you just feel prepared. You don't feel like you have to never eat red sauce again. You can have, I mean, I will say if your histamine levels are really high right now and you're absolutely miserable, then it's worth restricting your diet, and it's worth getting, all of your ducks in a row and getting your histamine down, because I always liken it to a bucket. If you have your histamine bucket in your system that's overflowing, you need to not only slow down the incoming water supply, or histamine supply in this case, so that it's not overflowing anymore, but you also need to have what's in the bucket redirected so that it is not just staying full. So really good opportunities there, rather than feeling like you're going to be miserable 3/4 of the year or more, depending on what your allergies are. And then some people, it's indoor allergies, it's mold, it's dust. That's something that's year round. And we need to be able to understand what our body's capability is in managing these things, and then what is most supportive, because it can be absolutely huge to do all of these things and feel better and minimize our disease risk, because when we lower oxidative stress and inflammation, it's a game changer for sure. Okay. So I find I'm anxious about my digestive issues, or I'm having digestive problems because of my stress level. I'm not sure which. What suggestions? Oh, how do I figure that out? So again, I would say it can be really valuable to reflect on when did the issue begin? Like if you feel anxious or worrisome, is that a common thing? Is that most of the time, most of your life, you've had different bouts of anxiety and stress and worry, or is it new? This was an adult that asked the question. It's about her. So you want to also look at circumstances. Is there something going on that, I don't want to say warrants it, because we don't ever want to be anxious, but is there stress or something going on in your life that makes sense why you'd have this kind of feeling? And when it comes right down to it, digestive problems can absolutely be caused by stress. We want to be able to look at the clues, like really be able to see, is it when I'm eating certain things that I'm having more of a problem? Or is it whenever I'm feeling anxious? And then that anxiety can be because you feel like you don't know what to eat, or it could be because you feel like you need to stay close to a bathroom, or it could be because you just feel like you are not physically in control of how your body's reacting to food. And that's annoying. So I get it. I really do. And I've had a lot of clients who have gone through different degrees of this. And it's a matter of identifying where that's what I like to do in our first meeting, is really pull apart the scenarios and see what is likely that root cause and that thread. Then we look at DNA. And don't get me wrong, I work with people who don't have their DNA, or they might, for some reason, they just haven't done it yet, or they don't want to. We can do that. It's just a really big opportunity missed if we don't eventually do DNA, because in the case of digestive issues and stress, I can look at DNA. Like, if you called me today and said, I have my genetics and I'm having these two problems, I don't know which comes first. I mean, we can look at your DNA and pretty much tell, because unless you have both SNPs on the side of anxiety and neurotransmitter stuff, or anxiety can be one of like four big areas. And then there are some other smaller issues. But looking at those from an anxiety perspective, and then looking at your digestive health, it's pretty easy to figure out which is the leader, and then be able to zoom in on the one that's leading the problem, start to solve that, and then really rework some of the details in the other category as well. So let's just say that I go in to a DNA assessment and I see that there are genes that are setting the person up for stress and anxiety. Neurotransmitter overload usually puts them in anxiety and feeling more worrisome. And then what we do is we start to give the nutrients through food as well as supplements to quell that sense of anxiety, start getting better sleep, start feeling more at ease. And then we can start working on any details of the nutrition that need to be addressed. So we're not ever going to just do one thing and everything's fixed, because guess what? The good news, honestly, it is good news. It would be super easy if we looked and said, oh, it's this one gene, let's just address this one gene and you're done. That would be easy, but I don't like that idea, honestly, because think about it. If one gene is responsible solely for a certain function, a lot of us are going to be in trouble, because we have a lot of genes that aren't at full capacity. It's just the way that it is. And when we learn that the body has all this orchestration going on, and one gene can kind of compensate for another, but we need to know where we're falling down on the job. We need to appreciate what the body needs in terms of support. And we know the basic resources. We need to stay hydrated. We need to have minerals, big thing. We need to have the right nutrition. We need to have movement and sunshine. We need to have community and connection. We need to have sleep and rest. And mindfulness is huge. So there are key things that we all need. What it is when we look at DNA is not, we're never going to say that you don't need those things. But what we are going to say is we can narrow in on, from a nutrition standpoint, when we look at those resources, we can narrow in on the nutrients that the body absorbs efficiently and the ones that the body doesn't either convert or absorb or connect, like even the receptors, like it's not even transported to the cells efficiently. When we learn that, it is a game changer, because then we're able to adjust how we receive it and not live the rest of our lives without it, which then could result in disease. And when you think about the big picture, it kind of blows my mind, to be honest, because when you think about our predecessors who had diseases and likely died from them, we used to think that those diseases were the cause of the death, like that was it. But what caused the disease? Well, it's just a disease. They just got it, right? No, they didn't just get it. They developed it because of something going on in their body, something that was lacking, something that was happening that wasn't happening. And, when people say to me that they have cancer in their family, which I have a lot of, and that they feel like they're doomed, I get it. I was that same way. But the fact is, we're not doomed. We need to know our bodies. And my mom died at 29 years of age. The fact is, I thought I was going to die young too. But what I realized was, when I started learning about health and when I really started doing all of my classes and all of the in-depth sessions about DNA support, I realized we're not just looking at something that attacks the system. We're looking at the body being susceptible. We're also looking at how the body is able to remove toxins, because we know toxins can cause cancer, how the body absorbs nutrients, because we know nutrients protect the body. And then how do we balance inflammation and oxidative stress? How do we balance our immune system or maintain it so that it is robust enough to fend off all of this garbage that we are exposed to? So when we identify that there are certain elements in our environment that we cannot handle alone, we either avoid it or we find ways to support the body in detoxing and getting rid of it. It's so magical, because now we're not being attacked by a disease. We are really shoring up the system and creating a fortress that protects us with strategy. We're not just guessing. We're not just building a moat and hoping for the best. We're actually creating a system that is very individualized, and it's based on facts about our own body. So that's why I also say it's never too early for a child, because we've seen some of the saddest situations where young people develop issues, and, athletes that are constantly having joint issues or bone, breaking bones and all of these things. And if you know where they might be lacking, you can support them so that we can avoid certain injuries, and we can avoid, obviously not all injuries. We get it. Sometimes it's an accident. Sometimes it's just overuse. But when we start to see a young person who is experiencing injury after injury that are very similar, we have to start looking at what is the body's capability of healing, what's going on with the immune system, what is going on with the ligaments and all of the even collagen. What is the collagen capability for the body? And if it's not capable of replenishing, what's going on with vitamin C? Vitamin C helps support collagen. Do we need to give the body a food-based vitamin C source that is really amping up the ability for the body to heal and to support the collagen? So we have a lot of opportunities, but we need to know the facts first to identify what's going on. Okay, so let's see. I've heard a lot about the MTHFR gene, so now I'm afraid that's what I have. Is it as bad as it's made out to be? No, it's not. But I'm not trying to minimize because MTHFR is one gene that is a leader in terms of methylation, and methylation is pretty big. Let me see if I can. It's probably too complicated. I was going to try to share something, but so if anybody's interested, you can always comment below. You can comment here or you can comment below if you're watching the replay and let me know if you're interested in the graphic that shows all of the SNPs that are involved in methylation. And I can talk you through it, but it's nice to have the visual if you're interested. But basically, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to methylate, and MTHFR is one of several genes in the folate pathway that leads to the methionine pathway. So I always do circles. You'll see me. I don't know why I always do that, but it's important because when you see it, when you think of a circle, you think of, the effects that one has on another. It's not linear. They're all related, and that's important. So when you think about MTHFR and you think it's like the most critical gene, it's important, but it's down when you've got your circular pathway of your folate. It's down in the lower right-hand side, probably right around 4 o'clock. Yeah, probably. It's so at the very top, though, we're looking more like at DHFR. So your dihydrofolate receptor bringing in your folate or your folic acid, converting folic acid into folate, hopefully. And if not, we need to start there. So if you have MTHFR, I want to know what DHFR is too. I want to know what MTHFD1 is. I want to know what MTHFS is. Like, we need to know the full folate pathway. So like I said before, it's a good thing that we're not reliant on just one gene. It is complicated when it comes to like, oh, just tell me what to do. But like, I get it. I just think I want you to appreciate how much value there is in that complication. Like, I don't want people to be like, oh, it's too complicated, I'm not going to do it. No, do it. I can help you. But what we're looking at, though, is when you're looking at that folate pathway, we can understand what type of folate do you need. I know you don't need folic acid, because folic acid, some people can manage it, but the fact is folic acid is in abundance if you're eating a standard American diet, an overabundance if you're eating a standard American diet, because it is enriched. It's in all the enriched flours, it's in cereals, it's in all of the processed and baked goods and all of that. So we can only process about 200 to 300 milligrams of folic acid, even on a good day. Meaning, if you have all of your DHFR genes working at 100%, we still have a max that we can actually process and convert. Once we've hit that max, it blocks our receptors. And even if we eat a beautiful green salad with all the folate that we need for the rest of the day, it's not getting through. So that is a big miss, because what do we go? We go to a restaurant. What do they give us? The first thing, bread, processed bread that has folic acid in it. Then we hopefully have a nice green salad. But if we've already hit our max for that folic acid for the day, we're not getting the benefits. And therein lies the problem. For anyone who is wanting fertility, that's on the list of objectives. I would say male or female, cut out all your folic acid. Make sure you're getting good folate, either through supplementation or through greens and, good healthy vegetables. Then once you get beyond that, you get to the MTHFR. There are two primary MTHFR genes. We want to look at both of them and understand where you are on that spectrum of limitation. And then that folate is going to the MTRR point, going into the methionine pathway. If we don't have enough B12 and we don't have enough folate then we run into problems with it actually going through that methionine cycle, methionine to SAMe into homocysteine, and then back either recycling through or going down into the CBS pathway, which gives us glutathione. So glutathione is what protects us, gives us immune support and detoxification capabilities. We want to make sure that all of this is working in harmony and that we are giving our body all of the nutrients that are valuable and necessary for health. And you can imagine, just in that basic explanation, all of those little key points where things could go wrong, but where they could be supported. If you have even a little glitch, like, ooh, let's smooth out that little glitch and make it better and give you the ability to detox, the ability to heal properly, the ability to procreate. It's so important. And then when you get around that, I just want to give one quick note. When you get around that curve and you hit that homocysteine where SAMe is going to turn into homocysteine, we need to make sure that we want enough homocysteine that it turns into cysteine. But we want to also make sure we don't have too much, because too much homocysteine can lend itself to heart issues. And cardiac issues are, especially if you have cardiac issues in your family, we want to know what your homocysteine levels are. If your doctor won't do a test, we can order it for like $30. If you're in the US, I think even Canada, I've talked to a few people, we've done, yeah, it's right around that amount. So it's not that expensive at all, but it gives you information on what you need to do to support your body and maintain a healthy level of homocysteine without getting burdened by it and overwhelmed and then cause, some long-term issues. So I feel like MTHFR has been given kind of a bad rap because so much is pinned on it. Yes, it is a pivotal point in that folate pathway because that's where it enters the methionine pathway, which is considered the methylation pathway, but it's not going to do the job on its own. We need to have B12. And then we get into the whole story about like methylated B12 and what type of B12. And yeah, I mean, it's important. It's very important. And also in that folate pathway, understanding if we need folinic or if we need methyl tetrahydrofolate. So it's really such an amazing experience to be able to say, I feel so good about my decisions on my supplements, on my diet, all my preventative steps. I feel, confident that I'm moving in the right direction. My symptoms are fading or eliminated entirely. It's just a really good situation because applied knowledge is definitely powerful. That I will say that. I mean, if you just do the DNA test and you don't do anything with it, it's knowledge, but you're not applying it. So I highly recommend that you dive in. Okay. Let's see. So we'll cover one more question. We're rounding out the hour, but it's my mom could really benefit from getting answers about her health issues, but she feels like it's always going to be this way for her. What could I say that would encourage her to think more openly? So I don't know what age your mom is, but I can guess that, um, anybody over 55 is probably going to be a little bit less eager to jump into something completely new like this. And what I will say is invite her to these sessions because I think it can be helpful. I hope it's helpful. I would say that being able to explain things that I don't know what her symptoms are, but being able to give her a sense of what her, like, what could be a root cause for her symptoms, and be able to help her understand that when you get to the root cause, you are able to understand what the body actually needs. It's not just about, again, I just feel so, when I was younger, I genuinely felt like, there's nothing I can do. Like, honestly, I just felt kind of helpless. And that was one of the reasons why I became a DNA strategist, is because when it comes to health, DNA health strategies are the number one thing I recommend to people. Being able to understand your body, being able to understand that we're not being attacked by disease, that we have certain susceptibilities. Yes, we do. But when you look at the function of those genes, those susceptibilities become capabilities that are being missed. So, like, opportunities that are being missed. If your capability is lower for processing folate, and you start compensating with the right kind of folate, like methyl tetrahydrofolate, and you start compensating the body, that opportunity is no longer missed. We're now compensating the body with exactly what it needs. And not only can we feel good about that, but it is going to power our bodies in a very specific way and help prevent any faltering that we would have had if we hadn't compensated, if we hadn't figured it out. And again, I kind of feel bad about it. Like, I'm not really, because there's nothing I could have done. I mean, my mom, I was 3 when my mom died, so there's nothing I could have done. But where I say that is, like, I feel bad that my parents didn't have those opportunities. I feel bad that it wasn't available to them. And I do feel like, I think what powers me through the most in all of these sessions and all of the work that I do, all the research and all of the studying that I do, it's never ending, because we're always finding new research and new genes and new information that is so valuable. And I ravage it because it's an opportunity for me to make sense and make use of what happened to my parents, so that it's not like it just happened in vain, that they lost their lives. Oh, well, so sorry that happened. There's nothing we could do. Right. But guess what? Now we can. So I'm not going to sit around and wait for a disease to happen to me or my children or you. I want to do something about it ahead of time. I want to be preventative, and I want to find out what it is that really makes the difference. So you can do that, and you can absolutely do a DNA test. The thing is, I want you to do a comprehensive DNA test. I don't want you to do a just test MTHFR. And I don't mean to be calling you out, the person who asked about this MTHFR, because if that's what you did, it's totally fine. A lot of times doctors say, if you have a particular issue, they'll say, well, let's just check and see if you have MTHFR, because that's just the buzzword in that. And doctors do a blood test. They charge you, your insurance, $300 to $500 minimum to test like 5 genes. I'm testing thousands of genes for 279. I mean, thousands of genes. And we're looking at them within 2 to 4 weeks. We're able to look at them. We're able to give you answers on actionable steps and figure out, based on what your goals are, what your family history is, what your personal health history is, and like, what's your priority? And then we're able to look at your genes and say, okay, these are the first few steps, and here's why. And all the questions you have, we can go through. Like, that's the goal, is really be able to empower you to move forward in a very strategic way. So I hope that this was helpful. I don't see any more questions. You are absolutely welcome. I'm so glad that this was helpful for those of you who were here. I hope that it is helpful for all who watch it as a recording. And again, you're welcome to comment below and ask me any questions. If you have any suggestions or topics that you want to talk about for the next time, I do these calls monthly, and they typically are about an hour, which we're just about to round out that hour in 1 minute. So I will happily answer your questions next month. And if you aren't going to be there, I do record them. So just shoot me the question, and I'll make sure that I include it so that you can listen to the recording. But I hope you have a very wonderful week, and I will catch you next time.